Story 1. Blockbuster declared bankruptcy, and the cable industry is declining. I remember when TiVo first emerged, and there were discussions about paying for channels a la carte. This has more or less happened, albeit in a different form than anticipated. What I'm referring to is how it feels like a ghost town. Story 2. Many people predicted the negative events that were to come, such as global terrorism, climate change, and pandemics. However, I never heard anyone suggest how incredibly foolish it was all going to become. Story 3. As someone who can actually remember being alive in 1990, I reflect on the sheer prevalence of the internet. We knew the internet would play a significant role in the world as technology matured. However, I don't think anyone anticipated that streaming services would completely replace traditional media. Regarding Donald Trump as a political leader, we had just come off the back of an actor serving as president, but Trump was the same then as he is today, with fewer of his personal controversies being widely known. Lastly, the significant decline of American automobile brands is striking. If you told someone from 1990 that brands like Pontiac, Mercury, or Plymouth no longer existed, they would think you were from a much further future than 34 years. Story 4. When I was a junior in high school in 1991, my economics teacher told us that it would not be long before we could order groceries on our computers and have them delivered to our door. It blew my mind. It was absolutely inconceivable to me then. Story 5. Spitting into a tube you received in the mail and, a few weeks later, discovering that your biological father isn't who you thought or that you were adopted or have long-lost relatives can be surprising. Story 6. We would stop capturing meaningful memories on camera and creating photo albums to keep in our homes. Instead, we take photos on our phones that get buried in a sea of pointless images of the many activities we did that day. There's nothing better than visiting our grandparents' house and flipping through photo albums. Story 7. He blocked me, but I am using a temporary account to view his stories. Just consider how many layers of explanation would be necessary for that sentence to make sense to someone from the 1990s. Story 8. I find it shocking and unbelievable that excellent health insurance coverage for myself and my spouse, which once cost only $80 a month, would eventually cost $700 for a low-quality policy with a high deductible and out-of-pocket expenses. Story 9. Gay rights. Most people in 1990 wouldn't have predicted that gay marriage would be legalized a generation later, and that celebrities and ordinary citizens would be so open about their sexuality. It was very taboo. I wrote a paper in 1996 arguing for the legalization of gay marriage, comparing it to interracial marriage, and everyone in my class, including the teacher, thought I was mistaken and that such a thing couldn't possibly happen without a significant shift in public opinion, which fortunately occurred. The fact that we'd have a black president just 3 administrations later was something I never expected to see in my lifetime. Despite this progress, we still haven't had a woman president. Geraldine Ferraro had already been a vice presidential running mate by 1990. I assumed we'd have a white woman president before a black president. Now we have had a black woman vice president before a white woman president or vice president. Story 10. In May of 1990, as I was starting doctoral classes and becoming a new father, I had no idea that by December I would be in Saudi Arabia as an Air National Guard flight nurse put on active duty. I expected technological advancements, so they did not surprise me. Some of what would have surprised me about 2024 was, we have not returned to the moon in over 50 years. I also expected I would have the opportunity to go as a tourist. Most people have facts available at their fingertips in seconds, yet millions remain uninformed. Cancer continues to be a major cause of death. We abandon supersonic air travel. In good news, same-sex marriage is legal and accepted by the majority of Americans. Story 11. Trump becoming president makes me think of the scene in Back to the Future where Doc is incredulous that Ronald Reagan, the actor, is president. An updated version could feature Trump. Smartphones have virtually eliminated social interactions, leading to increased loneliness. One thing I miss about the past is how friendly and open people were to strangers. Nowadays, everyone is focused on their phones or filming. Story 12. The rise of information technology would actually make people less informed and more ignorant. This was not what anyone was expecting. Story 13. The World Trade Centers will be bombed in 3 years, followed by complete destruction 8 years later from planes intentionally crashing into them. Princess Diana would die in a car accident in Paris after the vehicle she was in crashed, causing her to be thrown forward and trapped between the concrete pillar and the front seat. Russia hosted the 2014 Olympics, while China hosted the 2008 and 2022 Olympics. Story 14. 12 CDs for a penny? What an absolute steal were my thoughts as a child. Now we have every song imaginable in our pockets. Story 15. I never would have believed that we would have flat earthers, Holocaust deniers, and people who think gravity isn't real. Oh, and now they also claim that the sun is fake. The same individuals who deny the moon landing believe that we have created a fake sun. Story 16. How utterly online everyone is all the time. The internet in the early 1990s was a pretty niche thing, mostly for college students and professors. Even as it gained popularity, it never felt like it was going to explode the way it eventually did. I say this as someone who spent practically all my free time online even back then. Story 17. Donald Trump was just a quasi-celebrity cartoon character when I was in high school in the 1980s. If you had told me he would become president and the Republican Party would degenerate into an unrecognizable caricature of itself, I would have never believed it. Story 18. Dead malls. Smoking cigarettes is not acceptable. Smoking marijuana is permissible, and it can be purchased at the store down the road. Story 19. On the plus side, we will soon have all the information in the world at our fingertips. However, on the downside, it may turn some people into vaccine-hating insurrectionists who believe in conspiracy theories that distract us from the reality of our world. Story 20. The level of misinformation and manipulation on the internet is remarkable, along with the number of people who believe it. Story 21. Back then, we thought overpopulation would be an issue. However, most developed countries are facing population decline instead. Story 22. Do you know Mark Wahlberg? He is the brother of a member from a popular boy band. He is set to release a rap album and then transition into a successful acting career. Additionally, Will Smith, also known as the Fresh Prince, is on the verge of a significant acting career. However, he faced personal challenges that affected his public image. Story 23. A majority of the country would be okay with giving up personal freedoms and rights to feel secure. Story 24. That one item that fits in your pocket would replace dozens of items that you commonly use every day, including a camera, encyclopedia, road atlas, and credit cards. Story 25. I think the entirety of what has happened since 2000 would be astonishing for 1990. I remember the early 90s for Desert Storm, the rise of Bill Clinton, Joey Buttafuoco, and Nancy Kerrigan. Pretty much everything that occurred after 2000 would be almost unheard of, with September 11th at the top of the list. The whole Bush versus Gore controversy. The fact that we would return to Iraq. A black man named Barack Obama being elected president twice. Donald Trump being elected president. COVID-19. The complete collapse of goodwill surrounding the Disney brand, along with Boeing. The demise of airlines like Continental, PSA, TWA, and Pan Am. The death of brands like RCA, Magnavox, Circuit City, Radio Shack, Tower Records, Sears, Montgomery Ward, Bullocks, Buffins, Wet Seal, American Apparel, Denny's, and Kmart. 8 more Star Wars movies. Pixar, although Toy Story came out in 1995, so not long after. The early deaths of Michael Jackson and Prince. Meghan Markle. Joel Osteen, who emerged in 1999. The prevalence of social media, especially user-generated content like YouTube and TikTok. That the word Google would become ubiquitous and that the word Amazon would no longer refer to a river in the jungle. The rise of Tesla and Elon Musk, and the decline of classic car brands like Pontiac, Oldsmobile, Plymouth, and Mercury, with Jaguar and Lincoln barely hanging on. That Macaulay Culkin, who was the biggest breakout star of 1990 with Home Alone, would do one more Home Alone movie and then fade into obscurity, while his younger brother Kieran is enjoying a respectable career. A similar story applies to the Olsen twins, who have been eclipsed by their sister Elizabeth. That despite many movies made since then, Michael Keaton is still known as Batman. That Star Trek, The next generation would still be popular in reruns 35 years later. While superhero movies have always been popular, such as Richard Donner's Superman films, no one could have predicted the dominance of Marvel in the 2010s. That every hotel would be trying to be a boutique hotel. Modern-day Las Vegas. In 1990, the Renaissance was only beginning with the opening of the Mirage in 1989, alongside the proliferation of sports betting. Adult content on demand and platforms like OnlyFans. The emergence of Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and the rise of the wealthy Middle East. College football paying players, name, image, and likeness legislation, and the formation of superconferences. The struggles of Nebraska and Miami football over the past 20-plus years would have been unimaginable in the early 90s. That Deion Sanders would still be making waves as a sports personality. That Nick Saban and Bill Belichick, who were once assistants, would become sports legends. The decline of the Pac-10/12 would have been incredible just a few years ago. The ineffectiveness of the NCAA, an all-powerful force in the early 90s that imposed serious penalties on schools like SMU, is now routinely disregarded. The cultural decline of major publications like People, Playboy, National Geographic, The National Enquirer, much of which has been replaced by TMZ and Rolling Stone. The lack of trust in broadcast news, especially cable news. The irrelevance of MTV, that The Simpsons would still be on TV. The rise of places like Austin, Texas, and Nashville. In the early 90s, Atlanta was the place to be. The decline of cities like San Francisco, Portland, Seattle, and Minneapolis plagued by social unrest and homelessness. Conversely, some cities that suffered in the 70s and 80s, like New York and Detroit, have experienced a renaissance. No one would have guessed Atlanta would become Hollywood East, as many believed it would be Orlando. The decline of IBM as a major force in consumer computers. Apple was well on its way to popularity in the early 90s, having almost a monopoly on school computer labs even then, but no one could have predicted Apple's total domination today. The collapse of movie stardom. Today's movie stars almost uniformly became famous a generation or two ago. Will Smith, who was then known as the Fresh Prince, slapping Chris Rock, who was playing Pookie in New Jack City at the Oscars, was unheard of when it happened in 2022. Story 26. I feel like a lot of people don't remember the 1990s clearly. It was a more optimistic time, and most surprises were negative. I think most of us would not expect that transportation would have changed so little. Other than a few more digital features and safety enhancements, most cars aren't very different. They are more computerized, but I think we expected more by now. I certainly did not expect to see features in cars that would require subscriptions. The fall of Bill Cosby. That vinyl would become the preferred way of keeping physical copies of music. Story 27. To someone in New York City, Donald Trump became president. They would not be surprised by the next sentence. After he left office, he was indicted on 88 felonies. Story 28. Russia is actually starting a war with Ukraine. Never in a million years would I have thought it would escalate that far. Story 29. That the American populace would become so terrified, gullible, and hopelessly divided. It is impossible for anyone under 30 to comprehend the level of confidence America exuded from 1945 to 2001. For all the highs and lows throughout that time frame, there was always an underlying sentiment that nothing fundamentally bad could ever happen to us. We were untouchable, and we could defeat any and every challenge that confronted us. That entire sentiment was shattered in real time when the planes flew into the towers on September 11th, and it began a 20-year snowball that culminated with January 6th. Story 30. Probably September 11th. They likely became confident after the 1993 bombing failed to topple the towers. Then again, 1990s fiction often depicted the destruction of the towers in comics, movies, and cartoons. Story 31. September 11th, pandemic, Donald Trump, an African-American president, the rise of smartphones, social media, the shift of music and television to a commodity, the decline of cinema, the 2008 housing crisis, and average homes costing $1 million in many areas. Story 32. The wild Stalins did not bring the world peace that Rufus told us they would. It was indeed a false journey. Story 33. that the flower power anti-Vietnam War baby boomers would become supporters of perpetual conflict. Story 34. Very insightful comment. I just wanted to mention that you missed a perfect opportunity to write Fall of Nancy Kerrigan. Story 35. Ice Cube could have made family-friendly movies for Disney, and Bill Cosby could have gone to prison for his crimes. Story 36. One small portable device could make many items such as landlines, cameras, video cameras, and newspapers obsolete, and pretty much everyone will own one of these devices. Story 37. As a Brit, I believe that the United States has transitioned from being a cultural superpower to more of a laughingstock. I remember visiting the US and encountering technology one hadn't seen before, films in cinemas that hadn't been released yet, and cars equipped with features not found in Europe. Now, it is nearly the opposite. Americans who visit here are often pleasantly surprised by the quality of food, service, friendliness of people, and the state of the roads and technology. This change is significant since 1990. Story 38. A wireless supercomputer with video calling that you can hold in your hand. We knew about and used the internet and cell phones. However, smartphones are when things became unusual. Additionally, there are cellular smartwatches. Feels like I have a Dick Tracy spy watch. Story 39. Only 2 years after the respectful relationship between a Republican president and a Democratic House Speaker, we now have 2 senators insulting each other's appearances on the Senate floor, while each speaker attempts to impeach the president. Story 40. You could make money by putting a bunch of Mentos into a 2-liter bottle of Diet Coke, filming it with a phone, and sharing it instantly on the internet with the entire world as it surprised your friends. People would laugh and also be able to share it. Story 41. How the worst 1990s dad sneakers, white leather New Balance, would be the ones making a trendy comeback when 1990s fashion became cool again. Come on. I don't remember what I wanted in the 1990s that my mom wouldn't let me have. But it wasn't those. Story 42. That Tommy Lee would be functioning pretty much normally and Heather Locklear would be the one who overdosed. Story 43. In the 1990s, managing tasks by voice was science fiction. I can now open the shutters, ask anything to a virtual assistant, play music, launch the vacuum, and power the lights, all by just speaking. Seems normal, and I use it without thinking about it. It's truly amazing when I reflect on it. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.